So good afternoon, class. Uh, good afternoon, class. So we're going to have our lecture for this afternoon. So I'd like you to view this lecture. Unfortunately, I could not have a physical lecture with the class because I currently have a cough. Baka mahawa kayo. But let me just share the slide for our lecture for this afternoon. Where is that? RRL. Just check. Saan ba yun? Could not find it. Um, yeah. Yeah, let me just share my slide. Share slide. Share. Okay, for this afternoon, we will talk about the critical analysis technique in creating, again, a review of related literature. This is actually, I think, the third or the fourth lecture on creating your review of related literature. So this is very important because this would be one of the major, this is one of your critical part or the critical part of doing your thesis. Now, we're going to focus on developing critical analysis techniques for writing thematic review of related literature in paragraph form. So once you're done answering your RRL answer grid, which is a must, you will then need to be able to translate it into the paragraph form. So based on the related literature answer grid, so you will have to do this. Now, this will cover the process of translating the research data into synthesized paragraphs using a very structured approach. Now, the problem is that if you haven't gone if you haven't done or if you're not doing it your RL, this would really be a problem. So I hope you're actually doing this already, the RL answer grid, and have collected enough literature for you to be able to do this particular part of your thesis. You will learn to critically analyze research studies, be able to connect themes, and very important is to identify the gaps while using the answer grid structure for a very organized transition from the actual table or the notes that you have to a very cohesive text. Now, the thematic approach uh, will be explored and guiding you to organize your literature by themes specifically for chapter 2 of your research paper. So I'll be giving examples from the qualitative research, which will provide an in-depth insight into writing your RRL. So at the end, I'm hoping that you'll be able to critically analyze the research articles that you have collected in a structured answer grid to create an organized and thematic review of related literature. Translate a related literature answer grid into the comprehensive and synthesized paragraphs. And the third is to identify and describe the themes, research gaps, and methodological issues in a body of literature. And finally, you'll be able to write a thematic and well-organized chapter 2 of review of related literature by synthesizing different studies. So these are the ways of translating your RRL into the paragraph form group studies by theme. Now, you have to begin by categorizing the studies based on their shared themes or concepts. This is the one that I was telling you. What are the authors telling about their study? So if they have similar themes, concepts, or idea, you have to be able to put them all together. Now, such as methodology, the frameworks that they use, kung meron man, or key research variables or concepts. So this helps to organize the literature review coherently. For example, if reviewing studies on e-learning engagement, group articles that discuss technology use, engagement metrics, and learning outcomes come together. And examples of this one would be a research by et al. 2019 focuses on engagement through online tools, while Jones in 2020 explores how student interaction changes in virtual settings. So kita niyo, no, describing the two authors. And then the second way is to summarize the key findings. So you have to condense the main findings of each article, focusing on what the study contributed to the theme. Example, Smith et al. In 2019 found that online tools increase student engagement, while Brown and White in 2020 suggested that the same tools can hinder deep learning. And an example of a qualitative example would be Miller in 2019 found that technology enhanced engagement in short-term projects, but has less impact on long-term learning retention. So the third is you have to compare and contrast the results. You have to identify similarities and differences between studies, highlighting conflicting results or varying perspectives. For example, while both Green 2020 and White in 2021 agree on the importance of student engagement, the results diverge on the effectiveness of online tools. So a qualitative example of this is that Taylor in 2019 found increased student interaction in virtual classes, but Brown in 2020 noted lower engagement in asynchronous settings. Now, again, there is a proper way of doing your in-text citation. I think I made mention of that previously when you use, let's say, two or more authors. That's the APA format. And then you have to critique the methodologies, analyze the methodologies used in the studies, and evaluate their strengths and weaknesses. Smith et al. In 2019 used a mixed method approach, but its small sample size limited generalizability. Now, a qualitative example would be Wong in 2020 conducted a large-scale study using a quantitative design, but did not account for the regional differences, reducing the applicability of the findings. And then this is supposed to be number 4. If you can evaluate the theoretical frameworks, kung meron. So discuss the theoretical frameworks used in the studies and how they shape the findings. An example is that Jones in 2020 used a constructivist framework emphasizing learner interaction, while Green in 2019 adopted a behaviorist approach focusing on observable student behavior. Now, a qualitative example would be Miller in 2021 applied a social-cultural lens to analyze how group learning impacted online student collaboration. And then the fourth way is to identify the research gaps. So you have to point out the areas that lack sufficient research or underexplored in the studies. An example is that few studies address the long-term effects of online engagement tools on academic retention. Now, another example, Brown and White in 2020 highlight a gap in research on the impact of asynchronous learning on student motivation in rural areas. And then the fifth way is to relate the studies to your research focus. Link the literature to your own research questions or the area of study. Example, these studies highlight the importance of engagement in e-learning environments directly relevant to this research on enhancing the virtual classroom participation. Now, another qualitative example is that the insights from Green in 2021 and Smith et al. In 2019 will inform the investigation into how learning technologies affect student collaboration. The sixth way is synthesize the findings. Create a synthesis by combining the results from multiple studies into a cohesive narrative. Across studies, example, there is a consensus that online tools boost short-term engagement through their impact on learning outcomes remains debated. In another example, the studies suggest a general trend that online tools facilitate initial engagement, but may require sustained interaction for long-term benefits, made mention by Smith 2019 and Wong in 2020. And the seventh way is to discuss the contradictory evidence. So ito yung parang contrast in the introduction. Highlight studies that present opposing views of conflicting results. While Jones in 2020 advocates for the use of online tools to increase engagement, Brown and Green in 2021 argue that over-reliance on these tools can disengage students in the long term. So another qualitative example is the conflicting findings between White in 2021, who supports synchronous tools for engagement, and Green in 2021, who advocates asynchronous platforms, underlying an ongoing debate. And the last is that you have to conclude with research gaps in your contribution. So end by summarizing the gaps in the existing literature and how your research will address them. Example, these gaps highlight the need for further research on the long-term effects of online tools, which this study will explore. And this review underscores the lack of longitudinal studies on student retention, providing a basis for this research focus on the long-term impacts of digital learning tools. And now, how to write the thematic approach in your chapter 2 of your RRL. So the introduction to the themes, you should start by outlining again the main themes your review will address, and this serves as a roadmap for the chapter. Now, an example is that the literature review in this chapter is grouped into 3 themes: student engagement, technological tools in education, and learning retention. So, pero hindi nga ilalagay yung word na theme doon, ha? So, first is the student engagement. Discuss the studies that focus on student engagement and how different research addresses this gap. So, studies, tapos below that would be the explanation, the actual in-text citation. And then in the second naman, you have technology and education as your second theme. Present studies that examine how technology is being integrated into the classroom. And then there's the in-text citation, technological tools such as virtual platforms, blah, blah, blah. And you have example for my third theme man, learning retention. Present findings related to long-term learning outcomes and retention. So the actual in-text citation would say that while engagement improves in digital environments, studies like Brown and White have found mixed results on long-term retention. And more importantly, you should be able to do your conclusion or your synthesis, your conclusion. Summarize the key findings and highlight the gaps in your research. Example, the existing literature shows a growing trend in the use of technology for engagement, but there is a need for further research on impact on retention. So this is an example of a detailed RRL with 20 references and the synthesis. For example, ito, student engagement on online learning, tapos meron ditong mga citations, technology-enhanced learning tools, pedagogical framework in e-learning, long-term retention e-learning, collaborative learning in online education, and you have to create transitions between the themes, smoothly link different themes to maintain flow throughout the chapter. For example, having established important student engagement, we now turn to the technological tools that facilitate this engagement. Para talagang chronological, tsaka para ka nagkukwento. Number 7, you have to provide real-world applications. Discuss how the themes and findings can be applied in real-world educational contexts. So you have to implement examples, implementing collaborative tools in classrooms not only enhances engagement, but also prepares students for teamwork in professional environments. And the 8, you should be able to reflect on the implications of findings. So consider what the results of the studies mean for the field of education. So the findings suggest that integrating technology must be done, blah, blah, blah. And then you should be able to highlight the methodological innovations. If studies utilize unique or groundbreaking methodologies, point out to illustrate advancement in research practices. So the use of longitudinal studies by Brown provides valuable insights. Yeah. And of course, you have to end with a strong conclusion. or synthesis. Conclude the chapter by summarizing key insights, reiterating the relevance of literature to your research. So, ito yung another example of the 20 articles and the references. So that's the actual lecture for today, no, additional lecture. Let me just give you some examples. Let me just share screen. Okay, now this is an actual proposal created by Kirat Kaur, one of the student in grade 12, on her topic on climate change education, a case study of students' perspectives, actions, and learning experiences. So she made an introduction, the context, the content, and then the contrast. And there's a background of the study, usually 3 or 4. And then there's a statement of the problem. Then my significance of the study siya, which you're going to do, which you're going to be able to do soon. Then the scope, the limitations. Then chapter 2, which is the review of related literature. Tingnan nyo, ginawa niya, she was able to come up with themes, no, based on the literature. The profound impacts of climate change, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 themes. And she was able to explain it, okay? And later on, she created a synthesis. And then afterwards, she made the theoretical framework, tatlo. Okay, and then there's an explanation of the connection of 3 theories to your study and the conceptual framework. Since she's doing a case study, so IPO yung ginawa niya. And then she has the research methodologies, Robertian, local, and the participants. She did the data gathering procedure, data collection method, data analysis through thematic, and she also placed an ethical consideration. And that would be yung kanyang proposal. Okay? She did very well on her proposal. Let's take a look at another one. Let me just share. This time, this was a paper submitted by another grade 12 student on afforestation in schools towards sustainable campus. This is submitted in DLSU. So may abstract na siya, ibig sabihin natapos na yung research. So there are keywords. Okay, so there's the introduction. Okay, normally dito kasi it's the IMRAD model or the introduction, method, results, and discussions lang ilalagay. Okay, so but the same thought pa rin in the actual in the actual thesis or research. So may introduction siya, and then short introduction, the methodology, and the results, and there was a conclusion. Okay. Let me take another one. So in another research, still by a grade 12 student, she made a research on exploring the experiences and coping mechanisms of student cyberbullying victims. So yun ulit, meron siyang abstract, introduction, statement of the problem. Okay. Ayan. Meron siyang conceptual framework, may results siya discussion. Okay. And then, of course, there was acknowledgement. Okay. And then, isa pa. Let me just share. Ito naman, I think this was the paper of Pondrio, grade 12 STEM. His paper was all about naman fostering empathy and compassion, phenomenological study of students' perception attitudes towards animal welfare education. Okay, may abstract pa rin, may introduction, statement of the problem. Of course, there's a research question, the methodology. Okay, meron siyang framework, theoretical, conceptual, results, and discussion. Okay. Okay, so I think those are some of the examples that you may be able to use in terms of doing your RRL. So yeah, so that would be it for our lecture for today. You'll be doing an activity and be able to answer it towards the end of the period. Thank you, everyone.